My name is Colleen Hartley. I am 33 years old, and on the night of my birthday dinner, my mother-in-law slid divorce papers across the table as though they were a cruel party favor. The restaurant was glittering with chandeliers, polished silverware, and the sound of laughter that wasn't mine. They had planned it perfectly, my husband, his mother, and even his sister, all gathered to watch me break. When she announced, "From all of us," and pushed those papers into my lap, I felt every eye at the table studying my face. And then, as if it were comedy night, my husband raised his phone, recording my reaction for their private entertainment. If you're watching this, drop a comment, hit like and subscribe, because this isn't just a story, this was my life unraveling in front of a laughing audience. The smell of garlic butter and seared steak turned my stomach. I should have been celebrating another year of my life. Instead, I was being served betrayal with a side of humiliation. I signed my name without hesitation, slid the papers back across the table, and thanked her in a voice so calm it scared even me. Then I stood and walked out, heels clicking against the marble floor, each step echoing in my skull like gunfire. But what none of them knew was this: I had already prepared for this moment. When I stepped into the cold night air, the memory of my first meeting with my mother-in-law hit me. I could still smell the cinnamon in her kitchen, the forced sweetness in her smile. She had baked me an apple pie the first time I visited, but beneath the sugary crust, I saw her eyes flick to her son every time I spoke, as if gauging whether I was worthy. I never was, not in her eyes. Back then I ignored it. I wanted to believe family could be won over with kindness. But that night at the restaurant proved me wrong. Let me tell you about these people. My mother-in-law, Diane, was the type who dressed like money even when she was just going to the grocery store. Her pearl necklace wasn't for beauty. It was armor, a reminder to everyone that she was untouchable. My sister-in-law, Tricia, was a copy of her mother but louder, addicted to gossip like it was oxygen. She lived off her father's trust fund, but still looked down on everyone who worked for a living. And then there was my husband, Mark. Charming in public, cruel in private. The kind of man who loved applause more than love itself. He had been slipping away from me for months. His absences explained by business trips. His coldness explained by stress. But the way he smirked behind that camera confirmed everything. Still, not everyone in his family was rotten. His younger brother, Ethan, was different. Quiet, bookish, often treated like an afterthought. He once whispered to me, "I don't know how you put up with them." I'll never forget the sincerity in his voice. It was the only genuine kindness I'd ever been shown in that house. I walked away from that dinner with my heart racing but not broken. No, something inside me had shifted. They thought they had cornered me. But what they didn't know was that months earlier, I had found the strength to protect myself. I had uncovered secrets that Diane and Mark would never want to see in daylight. And those secrets were already in motion. Because while Diane was gloating over her birthday gift, while Mark was laughing behind his phone, I had already made sure the very foundations of their perfect little empire were crumbling. The night air was cool against my skin as I stood outside the restaurant, the sound of their laughter muffled by the glass doors. I gripped my purse tighter, feeling the weight of the documents I carried. Not the divorce papers, but something else. Something that would turn the tables. I turned and began walking toward the parking lot, my heels clicking with renewed purpose. Behind me, their laughter rang out again, unaware. They thought they'd humiliated me, destroyed me, discarded me like an old toy. But they had no idea what was coming next. Because tomorrow, Diane's luxury birthday party wouldn't end the way she imagined. It would end with my revenge. The morning after that dinner, I woke with the taste of steel in my mouth, bitterness mixed with resolve. The sunlight leaked through my curtains, brushing across the stack of files on my nightstand. They weren't just papers. They were my arsenal. Months before, when I first suspected Mark's absences weren't about work, I did what my gut told me to do. I started digging. Phone bills, unexplained charges, hotel receipts. He wasn't careful. He didn't need to be. He thought I was too trusting, too naive. But what he didn't realize was that every unanswered call, every late-night shower where his phone never left his side, became a seed of suspicion that eventually bloomed into certainty. One night I followed him. I parked a block away from the hotel he thought I didn't know about. I sat in my car as rain pattered on the windshield, and there he was, walking in with another woman, hand on her lower back, not a care in the world. My chest burned as I gripped the steering wheel, nails biting into my palms. That memory hit me again as I stood over the files. Photographs, bank transfers, email exchanges, all neatly organized in folders labeled and dated. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I had become a silent detective in my own marriage. And Diane? She wasn't innocent either. Her social charity events, the ones she plastered all over the community bulletins, were more than just charity. The money raised didn't always end up where it should have. I discovered checks funneled into accounts under her maiden name. Fraud masked as philanthropy. I hadn't planned to use it. At first I just wanted to know the truth. But after that dinner, after being mocked on the very day I was supposed to celebrate life, the choice was made for me. Ethan had called me that morning. His voice was hesitant. I heard what they did last night. I'm sorry, Colleen. I wanted to step in, but you know how they are. I closed my eyes, his words washing over me like a fragile comfort. Ethan always carried a softness, one that didn't belong in that family. You don't have to apologize, Ethan, I told him. Just don't be at Diane's party tonight. Trust me. He paused, but he didn't press. Hey, be careful. Struck me careful. As if what I was about to do was dangerous. Maybe it was. But sometimes revenge isn't a choice, it's survival. By evening, the city lights blinked awake, and I dressed not in mourning but in quiet triumph. A black dress that fit me like armor, subtle but commanding. I tied my hair back, lips painted a shade of red Diane always said was too bold for a married woman. Tonight it wasn't for Mark. It wasn't for anyone but me. As I drove toward the venue, a luxury ballroom Diane had rented to display her wealth and power, I remembered the first holiday I spent in their home. The way Diane made a joke about the gift I brought, a candle set I had saved up for. She smirked at the table and said, "How quaint." Mark laughed along with her and I smiled through the sting in my chest. I had swallowed every insult, every slight, every dismissal. But tonight I wouldn't swallow anything. Tonight I would serve it back. The ballroom glowed with gold and champagne. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above a crowd of designer gowns and tailored suits. The sound of violins floated through the air as waiters glided past with trays of wine. I spotted Diane at the center of it all, radiant in a silk gown, her pearls gleaming under the lights. Mark was by her side, camera in hand again, grinning like the devil. The sight of them tightened my chest, but I kept walking. My heels clicked on polished marble, heads turning as I passed. I wasn't their victim anymore. I was the storm they hadn't forecast. I moved to the bar, ordered a glass of champagne and felt the cold stem against my palm. The weight of the files in my purse pressed against me like a secret heartbeat. They thought I'd come here to sulk, to be the punchline of their night. But the truth was, the party had just begun. And I was about to end it. I lingered near the bar, letting the hum of chatter wrap around me like camouflage. The champagne fizzed against my lips, but my eyes never left Diane. She was in her element, kissing cheeks, whispering into manicured ears, collecting admiration like it was owed to her. Mark hovered close, recording snippets of her laughter, already building their next highlight reel. I could feel my pulse pounding, but I forced my body into stillness. That was the trick. Never let them see your storm until it breaks. My mind drifted back to another moment when I had been expected to smile through pain. Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Diane had orchestrated a toast, praising Mark for carrying the family legacy, while deliberately ignoring my contributions to the business I'd helped him build. I remembered the burn of the turkey stuffing on my tongue as I chewed in silence, the smell of rosemary and butter mixing with resentment. I swallowed then. But I wasn't swallowing tonight. A hand brushed my shoulder. Ethan. His presence startled me, though I shouldn't have been surprised. He never listened when told to stay away. His tie was crooked, his hair unkempt compared to the polished crowd. "You came," I whispered. "I had to," he murmured. "I couldn't leave you here alone with them." His words made something soften in me for a brief second. But softness was a luxury I couldn't afford. "Stay in the background," I told him. "No matter what happens, don't interfere." His worried eyes lingered on me, but he nodded and melted into the crowd. The MC's voice boomed over the speakers, silencing the chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our hostess, Diane Whitfield." The room erupted in applause. Diane stepped onto the small stage, her pearl necklace catching the light. She lifted her glass and began her speech, dripping with false humility. I am blessed beyond words tonight. Blessed with friends, with family, with a son who never fails me. She paused deliberately, her gaze sweeping the room until it found me at the bar. Her lips curved in a smirk. And even blessed with those who, well, let's say, taught me what family is not. Laughter rippled through the audience. My cheeks burned, but not with shame, with fury that settled into a calm, icy place inside me. I set down my champagne and walked forward. My heels echoed in the sudden hush as I reached the edge of the stage. Mark lowered his phone slightly, his smirk fading as he realized I wasn't playing my part. Diane tilted her head, amused. "Colleen," she said sweetly, her voice carrying through the microphone. "What a surprise. Would you like to say a few words?" "Yes," I answered, my voice steady. Gasps fluttered through the crowd as I stepped onto the stage, my purse heavy at my side. I took the mic from her with deliberate slowness, my fingers brushing hers. She looked smug, believing she still controlled the moment. But control was about to shift. I stared out over the sea of glittering eyes and fake smiles. The violins had stopped, the air thick with anticipation. I could smell the faint scent of roses from the centerpieces mixing with the sharp tang of champagne. "My name is Colleen," I began, voice steady, "and I was Diane's daughter-in-law until last night, when she gave me divorce papers as a birthday gift." Whispers rippled across the room. Diane's smile faltered for the first time, but she tried to cover it with a laugh. Mark stepped closer, phone back up, ready to record. I glanced at his camera, then back at the crowd. "What they don't know," I continued, my tone sharpening, "is that I didn't walk away broken. I walked away prepared." I reached into my purse. Diane's eyes flickered with curiosity, then worry. My fingers brushed the files, thick with evidence, as the audience leaned forward, sensing the shift in the air. "I think," I said, each word slow and deliberate, "that the truth deserves its turn at the microphone." The crowd gasped. Diane's hand froze on her champagne glass. Mark lowered his phone an inch. Ethan, from the corner of the room, stiffened as if bracing for impact. And in that moment I knew, this was the beginning of the end. I held the microphone in one hand and the thick folder of evidence in the other. The weight of it steadied me, reminded me of the countless nights I'd spent piecing it together while Mark thought I was asleep. The ballroom had fallen eerily silent, the violins abandoned mid-song, the crowd leaning in like spectators at the edge of a cliff. "Diane," I said, my voice slicing through the hush, "loves to talk about blessings. But I wonder, do blessings include siphoning money meant for children's hospitals into offshore accounts?" A collective murmur rolled through the crowd like thunder. Diane's painted smile cracked, her pearl-draped hand tightening around her glass. This is absurd," she stammered, laughing weakly. "She's just bitter." I snapped the folder open, pulling out a printed spreadsheet. The black and white numbers gleamed under the chandelier light. "These are the accounts. I traced them myself. Every donation from last year's gala ended up in here. Not to hospitals. Not to the poor. To you." Gasps scattered across the room. A man in the front row muttered, "That's fraud." Another whispered, "Is this true?" Diane's eyes darted toward Mark for rescue, but even he looked rattled, his phone trembling in his hand. "And then there's Mark," I continued, shifting the spotlight. "My husband flinched. The loving son. The loyal husband. The man who's been emptying our savings account on hotel rooms and jewelry for another woman." My voice broke slightly, not from weakness but from the raw memory of that rainy night when I saw him disappear into that hotel lobby. I remembered the way the streetlight caught on his umbrella, the sound of laughter that wasn't mine echoing in the dark, the taste of rain on my lips mixed with salt from my own tears. I steadied myself, letting the audience see the fracture before showing them the steel underneath. "This isn't bitterness," I said firmly. "This is truth." Mark finally lunged forward, trying to grab the microphone. "Enough, Colleen," he hissed. His voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. "Stop humiliating yourself." But I sidestepped, holding the mic high, refusing to let him silence me. "No, Mark. You've humiliated me for years. Silently, behind closed doors, with your smirks and your secrets. Tonight you don't get the last word." The audience clapped, hesitant at first, then louder, emboldened by the spectacle. People loved a downfall, especially when it was dressed in pearls. I caught sight of Ethan near the back. His eyes burned with a strange mixture of pride and worry, his hands balled into fists as though he wanted to shield me from what came next. I gave him the smallest nod, a silent reassurance. "I've got this." Diane, desperate now, tried to laugh it off. "These are lies. She's fabricating everything." But I wasn't finished. From the folder I pulled a single envelope. My ace. "This," I said slowly, holding it high, "is a letter from the Board of Trustees at the hospital. They started their own audit 2 weeks ago after I anonymously tipped them off. They have proof. And by next week so will the police." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, phones flashing as people started recording. Diane's face drained of color, her pearls suddenly looking like chains around her throat. And then, just as the noise reached its peak, I lowered my voice, pulling everyone back in. "I came here tonight because you thought I was powerless. Because you thought handing me divorce papers would end me. But you should know, when you push someone to the edge, you don't just get silence. You get fire." I dropped the mic onto the podium, the sound exploding through the speakers. The files spilled across the stage like spilled secrets, undeniable and irreversible. Diane froze. Mark stood pale, his phone hanging uselessly at his side. The ballroom had transformed from celebration to tribunal. And I wasn't done yet. The ballroom buzzed like a hive struck by a stone. Phones lifted, whispers collided, and the golden glow of chandeliers no longer felt warm. It felt harsh, exposing. Diane stood frozen, her lips twitching, her pearls trembling against her collarbone. Mark's face, once smug and glowing behind that camera, had gone pale, his jaw tight. I breathed in the weight of that silence before I spoke again. "You thought I was weak. You thought humiliation would break me. But weakness is underestimating the woman you tried to destroy." The memory of my wedding day flickered through me then. The scent of lilies filled the church, my dress trailing like a dream, Mark whispering promises that now tasted like poison. Diane's disapproving stare had followed me down the aisle, and I told myself then that love would shield me from her judgment. I had been wrong. Love had been the weapon she sharpened against me. Now, standing on her stage in her world, I turned her weapon into mine. "You gave me divorce papers as a gift," I said, my voice steady, my gaze locked on Diane. "But you've given me so much more tonight. You gave me the chance to show everyone who you truly are." A collective hush swept through the room. Even the violinist in the corner had lowered his bow, frozen mid-air. I knelt briefly, gathering more files, holding up a series of photographs. Mark's receipts from hotels, time-stamped and signed, his hand entwined with another woman's in grainy stills. Gasps swept the crowd. One woman muttered, "He brought her here before, didn't he?" Another whispered, "I always suspected." Mark surged forward again, his voice breaking. "This is private. You're humiliating us." I rounded on him, fire in my chest. "You humiliated me when you pressed record last night. You humiliated me when you made my pain a punchline. This," I swept my arm toward the crowd, "this is justice." Diane slammed her glass down, the champagne spilling onto the stage. "Enough of this circus. She's nothing without us. Nothing." That word, nothing, cut deeper than she realized. I remembered Christmas morning, the smell of cinnamon rolls, the way Diane had handed me a plain sweater while everyone else opened expensive gifts. She had leaned toward me and whispered, "You should be grateful we include you at all." I had smiled then, swallowing the humiliation like medicine. But tonight the taste returned and I spit it out in front of everyone. "Nothing," I repeated softly, stepping closer to her. My heels clicked against the wood, each step ringing louder. "No, Diane. I'm the one thing you can't control. And that terrifies you." The audience was electric now, some filming, some whispering, some clapping under their breath. Ethan edged closer, his eyes fixed on me as if he were silently urging me on. I leaned into the microphone again, voice low and sharp. "I could end this here. Walk away and let the court system tear your empire apart piece by piece. But where's the fun in that?" Diane's eyes widened, her breath quickening. Mark reached for her shoulder, but she shook him off, her mask cracking, her control slipping. And then I delivered the final blow of the night. Not the end, but the cut that would bleed until morning. "Tonight is supposed to be your celebration. So let's celebrate truth. Because tomorrow morning, the media will have every single piece of this evidence. And by the time your pearls hit the floor, Diane, the world will know you for what you really are. The crowd gasped again. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. Someone else whispered, "The press will eat this alive." I dropped the remaining files onto the table, their pages fanning out like feathers, damning and undeniable. The chandeliers above glittered, catching the panic in Diane's eyes, the fury in Mark's. The air vibrated with tension, the kind that could only snap in one direction. I turned away from the mic, the crowd's noise swelling into chaos behind me. My pulse was steady, my steps calm. I could feel eyes burning into my back, but I didn't look. Because I knew, the real storm hadn't even started yet. Tomorrow would not just be Diane's downfall. It would be their destruction. The night air hit me like a rush of freedom as I stepped out of the ballroom, leaving chaos behind me. My heels clicked against the stone walkway, steady, deliberate, a sound that felt like victory. Behind those walls, Diane's kingdom was cracking. I could still hear muffled voices, some gasps, some outrage, and above it all, the desperate tremor of her voice trying to regain control. But there was no control left to take. I slid into my car and rested my hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly, my heart steady for the first time in months. The files were gone. They were in the crowd now, in the cameras of guests who had filmed every second. The truth was loose, untamable. Even if Diane managed to grab every envelope from the stage, she couldn't silence the phones, the whispers, the headlines waiting to be written. And Mark had looked like a boy stripped of his toys. His smirk was gone, his camera lowered, his mask shattered. For once, I didn't see the charming man he played in public. I saw what he really was: small, cowardly, terrified of being exposed. On the drive home, memories surfaced unbidden, like ghosts demanding to be acknowledged. The first time I cooked dinner for him, the smell of garlic bread filling our tiny apartment. He'd laughed, kissed my cheek, told me, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." How hollow those words felt now. How heavy they had become, knowing he'd traded me in for secrecy and lies. But those memories didn't weaken me anymore. They fueled me. They reminded me why I had fought back, not just to reclaim myself but to show him that betrayal carries consequences. The next morning it began. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Texts, calls, emails. Headlines blared across social media. Philanthropy queen exposed in charity fraud scandal. Pictures of Diane's frozen face at the podium spread like wildfire, her pearls now a meme, her name trending for all the wrong reasons. Mark wasn't spared either. Photos of him with his mistress surfaced, courtesy of the very evidence I had handed out. By noon, his law firm had suspended him pending investigation into ethical concerns. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee steaming in my mug, scrolling through it all with a calmness that felt almost eerie. The storm had arrived exactly as I promised. A knock came at my door. My chest tightened for a moment, but when I opened it, Ethan stood there. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "They're losing their minds," he said quietly. "The house is chaos. Reporters are parked outside. Diane hasn't stopped crying. Mark's furious, he said you've ruined him." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. Good. Maybe now he knows what ruined feels like. Ethan hesitated, his gaze soft. "I just wanted to say, thank you. For doing what none of us ever could." There was a sincerity in his voice that nearly broke me. He wasn't like them, and I knew he never would be. "You don't owe me thanks," I whispered. "You just owe yourself the chance to break free from them." That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window watching the city lights flicker. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next blow, the next insult, the next betrayal. Felt whole. Scarred, yes, but whole. And as I sipped, I recorded my final words. Not for Diane, not for Mark, but for myself and anyone who had ever been in my shoes. If you're watching this, have you ever faced betrayal? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. Because if I learned anything, it's this. They can try to strip you down, but the truth always finds its way through the cracks. The world outside buzzed with their downfall, but inside I had my peace. I had my voice back. And I had the proof that no matter how carefully they built their empire of lies, it only took one push to bring it crashing down. They thought they buried me. But I was the seed. The queen of revenge always rises.